Hi, hey, hello, and welcome to another episode of The Educated Fan. My name is Brandon, and I'm joined here by your co-host, my best friend. I'm pretty sure I could just hit a button these days, Andrew, for the intro. I think I could just play all that, and then we kick it off from here. How was your weekend, man? How was the lake?
It was good. It was fun. The weather a couple days wasn't the greatest, but hey, got to swim, got to relax on the boat. It was good. Nice, relaxing few days up in Michigan. Went to some wineries, relaxed with the fiance and her family. So it was good. How was your week, man?
Mine was good. You thought of the same thing I thought of when you set out on the boat, didn't you? Yeah, took the boat out last week. My week was fine. Yesterday was Paige's first Sunday in a while that she had to work, so all day long I kept thinking it was Monday, and I was like trying to do Monday things instead of getting ready for the podcast things, you know, so it was weird, and here we are recording on Monday, so it's been a topsy-turvy 2 days. I just wanted to open up this show and remind you guys of these wonderful cups, and I know my camera's flipped, that's why it's all backwards. Show yours, Andrew. Okay, remind you guys of these wonderful cups that were made for us by a friendly woman named Kay. Her Facebook page, she just started a group on Facebook for her obsession with making these tumblers. It's Every Cup Begins with K. That's cup with a K and K-A-Y. Every Cup Begins with K. Catchy, love the name. You guys should go over there on Facebook, check that page out, and if you want to purchase from her, obviously send her a message. She does custom everything. You can get the turf cups like we have, or she has tons of examples of cups that are not turf. They come in all shapes and sizes, so go check that out and let her know Brandon and Andrew from The Educated Fan sent you. And yeah, go get one of those cups. They're very well priced compared to the competitors. I've looked. Go look on Etsy. They're selling these bad boys for a lot more than Kay's going to make a custom cup for you. She's also the only one that I've seen doing the turf. So go check those out. We love our cups. They're good quality. Yeah, go check them out. So, Andrew, today we got a little Colts defensive line group to talk about. We got an AFC North conversation coming. Some news around the league. Very empty list this morning. All of a sudden, we have some news to talk about. And as always, during this time of year, we have some new kid at school about a very, very interesting rookie in Mike Strawn. But first, let's get started, Andrew, with this Colts defensive line group. Little disrespect floating around on the internet this week from all these rankings that all come out this time of year. And one of the items was top 5 defensive lines in the league. The Colts were not on this specific list. The Cardinals were, I guess, with the addition of J.J. Watt, maybe. Do you think, right from the top, do you think the Colts defensive line is a top 5 unit?
No, I do not. I think they eventually could be a top 5 unit, but as of right now, when you have no proven pass rushers on your defensive line, you're not going to be a top 5 defensive line in the NFL. I would say right now, my unbiased opinion, taking my Colts fandom out of it, I'd say right now they're probably maybe 15 to 20. And that's solely just on the fact that DeForest Buckner is there, Grover Stewart is there. But when you look at the talent on the outside, I mean, Kwity Paye, he's a rookie, hasn't done anything in the league yet. Kamoko Toure has been very hurt. Tyquan Lewis has been a backup his entire career. So when you're talking about these guys, we can say they have potential to be good and have solid seasons, but when you're talking about as of right now and not just projecting, I would not say they are in that upper echelon of defensive lines in the NFL.
Okay, you love hypotheticals so much, so I'll ask one. Kwity Paye works out the way we think he's going to. I mean, we were so excited when he fell to the Colts. We expect really good things out of him. So let's assume he pans out the way we think he will. Even 3/4 of the way, that we think he will, because realistically his sack numbers weren't super high at Michigan, but he also wasn't, allowed to just pin his ears back and go after the QB. Kamoko Toure, we've seen flashes where we think he could be really good. So let's play a game of, if those two work out as well as we think they could this year, by the end of this year, I think we have second to the Rams, the best defensive tackle group in the league. If we can get some pass rushers on the edge working, then are we in the top 5?
I don't think so, because I don't think they can reach the hypotheticals. Because hypothetically, I think
they're fun.
Where I think Kwity Paye can be, I don't consider him going to be a top 5 or a top rusher in the league right off the bat. Even at my highest ceiling for Kwity Paye, I'm thinking that the Colts, let's say this, Kwity Paye does well. If Kamoko Toure can show those flashes more consistently, we know DeForest Buckner is the top 2 defensive tackle in the league. Grover Stewart, one of the best nose tackles in the league. I think then the Colts can flirt with the top 10, but top 5, in order for this Colts group to be a top 5 line, you need to have Dwight Freeney and Robert Mathis rushing on the ends, and we don't have that right now.
My God, that's a lot of talent to catapult us to just the top 5. I think that catapults us to number 1. But let's talk about the defensive tackles first, Andrew. What do we expect out of Buckner and Stewart? DeForest Buckner, I don't even think it's arguable. I think he's clearly the second best defensive tackle in the league. All the PFF stats back that up. Pro Football Focus believes that as well. And honestly, he had some numbers that were better than Aaron Donald this past year. I'm not going to say he's Aaron Donald or better, but I mean, in certain statistics, he was better. What do you expect from that duo this year on the inside?
I expect really big things from our defensive tackle group. I honestly think when you're looking at that defensive line, that's our strong suit right now. It's those 2 defensive tackles. Let's start out with Buckner. DeForest Buckner last year led the Colts in sacks with 9.5. He had 26 quarterback hits. And when I was doing my piece on the defensive tackles that posted this past week, you're looking at this group and you're thinking, DeForest Buckner, people forget he was injured for a good part of last year. He barely practiced the last month and a half to 2 months because of that ankle injury. And when you're dealing with an 80% DeForest Buckner and he's still going out there and dominating offensive lines, it's pretty crazy to think what he can do fully healthy. So if we get a year of DeForest Buckner fully healthy, I could very easily see double-digit sacks for DeForest Buckner and another all-pro year. And the same with Grover Stewart. Grover Stewart last year finally came into his own. And while he only had a couple sacks, I think, Grover Stewart was a monster against the run game. The play against the Tennessee Titans in Tennessee, when he got in the backfield and just ripped Derrick Henry down to the ground like he was a rag doll, that's hard to do. So Grover Stewart is still going to be that huge brick wall in the middle against the run game. And if Grover Stewart himself can kind of start adding moves to his pass rush game as well, this is a top defensive tackle group in the NFL. I could put the defensive tackle group in the top 5 to top 10 in the NFL. If we're just focusing on that position group, I have really high hopes for this team. If a full healthy Buckner, and then for Grover Stewart to improve once more and take another step and add another element to his game.
Yeah, I think Grover Stewart's been fantastic. I think Buckner, like you said, if we get him fully healthy, he's a dangerous man. I mean, he was throwing dudes around last year like they were small point guards. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, grown men on the offensive line shouldn't be getting thrown around like DeForest Buckner was doing to him. It was almost wrong. I mean, it was sad to see. I mean, if he were getting sack numbers like Aaron Donald, you'd be having the exact same conversation about Buckner and Aaron Donald right now. The depth, though, last year when Buckner was out, along with who was out with Al-Qadim Muhammad, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, both
Danico Autry.
I'm sorry, same game. Our defensive line was terrible. I mean, god awful. If Buckner's out, we were in trouble last year. What do you think about the depth this year compared to last?
I think Chris Ballard definitely made it a focus in this offseason, not only just necessarily with the moves he made in the draft by getting Dio Adangbo, who can also play inside when he comes back from his Achilles injury, but the signing of Antoine Woods. Antoine Woods was a starter for the Dallas Cowboys for the last few years. Yep. Now he fits more of the nose tackle mold. So if Grover Stewart goes down with an injury or Grover Stewart comes out for a spell, I would think that Antoine Woods would be the one to fill that hole. So when you're talking about guys that could fill in for DeForest Buckner at the 3 technique, honestly, you can look outside of the defensive tackle group as much as you can look inside. So like Tyquan Lewis, he can fill in there. I already mentioned Dio Adangbo. They could both fill in at the 3 technique if Buckner went down. But if you're talking about the other defensive tackles, Taylor Stallworth, he was a guy that primarily played nose, but he can also play some 3 technique for the Colts. But a guy that we don't have on the list, and it's a guy that not very many people think of,
he's on the
Cameron
list.
Klein. Cameron Klein.
Oh, no, he's not. Sorry.
So, Cameron Klein, he fits the mold of more of a 3 technique. I think he's about 6'5", 280 pounds, and he's more of the pass rushing defensive tackle. So, and I think that final roster spot with the defensive tackles, if the Colts do keep 4 outside of Buckner, Stewart, and Woods, it's going to come down to Stallworth and Klein. And if they're looking for somebody more to fit that that 3 technique defensive tackle spot, I think Klein might have an edge. It's going to be a fun battle to watch in camp.
Helps to not be muted when you want to talk. Yeah, I obviously having a guy that started a lot of games for the Cowboys, but that defense in years past has not been too bad. Last year was not good. But I mean, that team was a train wreck in general last year. So yeah, I'm glad to have a little more depth there, because if something happens with Buckner, even if it's a COVID close contact, if he's not vaccinated, we obviously don't know if he is or isn't. Boom, you know what I mean? He could be out for a game. So expectations for Kwity Paye.
Pain. So this is my realistic expectations for Kwity Paye is, and I think all Colts fans kind of need to take this approach. Don't expect Kwity Paye to immediately go out and get 15 sacks a year. If you're doing that, you're kidding yourself. You're setting yourself up for disappointment. It does take some time for rookie defensive ends, rookie pass rushers to adjust to the pro game. Even the great Dwight Freeney. The great Dwight Freeney didn't come on until the second half, 3/4 of the way through the season of his rookie year. And that's when he started to kind of figure it out, started to get those sacks. I think at my ceiling, and I think he could reach this, if Kwity Paye, we're probably going to see him start out slow, but I think towards the middle of the year, because he is such a smart guy, because he works so hard, he's going to get into the rhythm of this defense, get to learn his role, get used to just rushing the quarterback and pinning his ears back like you talked about earlier. I could see Kwity Paye putting up about 8 sacks this year. And I think if he does that, you have to be ecstatic about where he is, because if he puts up 8 sacks in his rookie year, still adjusting to the game, imagine in that second year and that third year when pass rushers normally take that big leap and really figure out the game of pro football, you're going to be looking at a guy that the Colts expected to get, a guy that's going to give you double-digit sacks for years to come, be a perennial Pro Bowl talent, and somebody that you can really rely on and make offensive coordinators stay up at night because they're game planning on how to block Kwity Paye and DeForest Buckner all at the same time. So I think if Kwity Paye, because the Colts are going to give him the lion's share of the reps there at right end, he's going to be the starter. They have huge plans for him. If Kwity Paye can reach his ceiling, I think that's probably about 8 sacks. You could see maybe a couple forced fumbles, and I think he's going to be an asset in the running game as well.
People really need to understand, and I already kind of hinted at this, and we've talked about it in the past, but like Tyler, for example, big-time NFL fan, Miami Dolphin fan, pays close attention to his team, but these are the things you don't realize when you don't dive into a guy because, they're not on your team. Kwity Paye was not, first of all, in college, you don't have as much time to get to the quarterback because of run options. They get rid of the ball fast, spread offense, all that. I mean, tons and tons of different reasons, okay? Then on top of that, not all the defensive schemes in college are geared towards sacks because it's such a hard thing to achieve in the first place. It's more contain and run stopping. So, without any distractions, obviously you still got to stop the run. You got to contain, but Kwity Paye is going to be let loose in regards to being able to rush the passer. And I think he's going to have a fun little year. I think 8 is realistic. That's still more sacks than he had in all of college, I think. I think what do he have? Maybe not all of college, but definitely more than the senior year.
He had 11 and a half sacks his entire career at Michigan.
I think it was 4 this past season. Is that right? You remember?
Yeah. 4 this past season. I think he only played about 6 games. So he was or 2 this past season, one of those, sure. But he didn't play much this past year because of the game being canceled, Big Ten not playing as many games, etc. Yeah,
that's another thing that hurt guys coming out this year. Their stats are skewed and it's going to affect for the next 2, maybe 3 years because of the shortened season this year. So, I mean, I have high expectations for Kwity Paye. I don't have Pro Bowl expectations for Kwity Paye. Probably not Defensive Player of the Year expectations, but I expect him to have an impact on this defensive line in a positive fashion.
I think Kwity Paye, though, he can be a candidate for Defensive Rookie of the Year. I think he has the capability to do that. I think it'll probably be between him. Micah Parsons will probably be up there because he's going to get a lot of playing time. If Jalen Phillips has a good season rushing the passer for Miami, he could be up there. We'll see, but I think Kwity Paye can be in that discussion.
Yeah, and Tyler definitely is calling Jalen Phillips the Defensive Rookie of the Year. So he's definitely already talking about that. Tyquan Lewis, Kemoko Turay, contract years this year. For me, Kemoko Turay is the key to the puzzle here. Injuries have held him back from what we've seen as really good potential. He's not been able to fulfill that. What do you think how do you think these two are going to handle their contract year?
So with Turay, you're right. It's all about staying healthy. And I think when he was healthy back in 2019, he was starting to come on that year. He only had 1.5 sacks in those 5 games, but he was one of the best pass rushers according to Pro Football Focus in the entire league as far as pass rush win rate and as far as putting pressure on the quarterback. I think he was putting pressure on the quarterback on 25% of his snaps, something ridiculous like that. So if Turay can stay healthy, I mean, he's a fantastic pass rusher, and I think he can just build on that. He can really show what he's made of. Now, as far as Tyquan Lewis, I actually think Tyquan Lewis has a better chance of starting at that defensive end opposite of Kwity Paye. Yeah. Because when you put Tyquan Lewis out, it's going to be Danico Autry's old position, that left defensive end, the strong side defensive end, where you're asked to defend the run a little bit more. You're asked to really set the edge and keep the running back inside or the quarterback inside if they're rolling right. That's primarily what that position is for, along with the pass rushing. Kemoko Turay, really, he's still a liability against the run. He's more of a situational pass rusher as of right now, and a guy that you want to pin their ears back and go get the quarterback. But Tyquan Lewis, he can put pressure on the quarterback and get some sacks, but he can also play pretty well against the run. So I think that's why Tyquan Lewis should be favored to start at that strong side defensive end position over Kemoko Turay. Doesn't mean he's going to have more sacks than Turay, more production, but I think as far as a fit against the run, it would probably be him or Al-Quadin Muhammad. I hope it's Lewis over Al-Quadin Muhammad because I like Muhammad, but I want to see what Tyquan Lewis has. I want to see if Tyquan Lewis can be a valuable member of this team, so that way if the Colts want to keep him, he shows it on tape and we have some tape to go off of. So that's why I think Lewis is the favorite to start there, but I think if we can get Turay in those NASCAR packages or those third down sub packages where he can just go and get the quarterback and mainly just stay healthy and show that you can be that pass rushing presence, I think that's what those two need to focus on for this year as they head into the final year of their rookie deals.
Breaking news. Raiders president Mark Badane resigns. Dan Ventrell takes over an interim role. Okay, moving on.
Interesting.
Who gives a shit? But it just popped up from an article from The Athletic, everyone, just so you know. I don't want to take credit. So on that list of guys, Andrew, and you know what? Let's just talk about Ben Banigou first. Make or break season for Ben Banigou. You've got a question mark here. I think we all know it. Talk about what he needs to do, and then I have a question about basically that position opposite Kwity Paye when you're done.
So Ben Banigou, like I said, it's a make or break year for him. Honestly, he was a healthy scratch for 7 out of the 16 games last year. And when you're a second round pick and you're getting a healthy scratch, that means you're not even living up to the backup role. So he's got a lot of work to do. I've heard he's been training with DeForest Buckner this offseason, so that's good. His attitude when he was talking to the media wasn't necessarily the best earlier in camp. But then again, I mean, really that doesn't matter. What all that matters is what you're doing on the field. So if Ben Banigou doesn't step it up and show that in even training camp in the preseason, if he doesn't show that he has taken this seriously and shown that he can make that next step, there's other guys on that defensive line group that are coming for his spot. I mean,
yep.
We got Isaac Rochelle that's there, Al-Quadin Muhammad, although these guys on the back end of the defensive end roster that are trying to really make it and solidify themselves on the team. Ben Banigou might get cut or traded towards the end of camp if this doesn't pan out. So he's really got to make an impression, and he's really has to prove to the coaches that he could do this and he can be a valuable contributor on that defensive line group.
Okay, and now for my question. Who would you like most to see earn the starting spot opposite of Kwity Paye by the end of the season? Let's shorten this list, okay? It's between, I guess, Taekwon Lewis, Kamoko Toure, Ben Banigou, and Dayo Odeyingbo. Would those be the 4 that you would narrow it down to?
Yeah, those would probably be my 4 that I would consider. I'm gonna be realistic like always. I don't think Dayo Odeyingbo will be in that conversation this year.
Nope.
If he is, it's a miraculous recovery from his Achilles.
He's playing some good football.
He's playing some damn good football very quickly after that. I don't think he'll be in the conversation this year. 2022, I could very well see Dayo Odeyingbo being our starting left defensive end next to Kwity Paye. I also think, though, I mean, as a ceiling and thinking about their respective ceilings and their respective potential, I think Kamoko Toure has the highest potential out of all of these guys, because we've seen his flashes as a pass rusher. If he can develop into a better fit against the run, I think he's a legitimate starting defensive end in this league. Taekwon Lewis, I think, would come right after Toure, because I think he's more well-rounded at this point. Yeah. With the pass and the run, but he doesn't have the ceiling that Kamoko Toure has. So as of right now, if all goes to plan and everything goes perfect, I would like to see Kamoko Toure as that starter, because that means he's improved against the run. He's stayed healthy. He's shown he's still a monster against the pass. But realistically, I think Taekwon Lewis will be that starter and keep that role pretty much throughout the year.
Yeah, that'd be my expectation as well. Kamoko Toure would be the one I would pick out of that group as well, as my hope of, he's maybe even by the beginning of the season. I highly doubt by the beginning of the season, but I think by the end of the year, if he is, stepping towards his potential and towards his ceiling, that would put him in a good position to be the starter on that other side of Kwity Paye. Anything else for the defensive line, sir?
I just think right now it's outside the defensive tackles. It's just a really unproven group, and I'm excited. Yeah. I think this is one of the groups that we have probably the most question marks about heading into the season. Last year, the Colts had decent sack numbers, but there were still too many times where the quarterback felt like they had all day back there in the pocket and could throw the ball down the field. So what I'm looking for with this young group is not necessarily huge sack numbers that need to be produced. It'd be great if the Colts defensive line could have between 25 and 30 sacks this year just with them, not counting the cornerbacks and the linebackers, things of that nature. But I just want to see that pressure, that constant pressure. We know we're going to get it up the middle with DeForest Buckner, but I want to see the progression of Kwity Paye, the progression of Tyquan Lewis, Kamoko Toure. Yep. That's what I'm looking for throughout this season with this defensive line group.
Fantastic. Okay, let's move it along to a little AFC North breakdown. This season, the AFC North is going to be playing the NFC North. In the AFC West, so Packers, Bears, Lions, Vikings, Chiefs, Broncos, Raiders, Chargers. There we go. Geez, step in and save me at some point, Andrew, you prick.
I had faith in you.
So the Steelers last season, 12-4. Big Ben coming back, Juju coming back, Bud Dupree coming back. They kept the defense together for the most part. I'm sorry, they lost Bud Dupree. My apologies. The defense kind of actually fell apart a little bit. They lost him and Mike Hilton. But let's talk about who they picked up, Andrew. Joe Haeg. Another Colt. Love seeing Joe Haeg bounce around.
Joe Haeg.
I love Joe Haeg. Picked up Joe Haeg and a guard, Trey Turner. He's getting 1 year, $3 million. This team, the reason they failed last year was because they couldn't run the football. And to me, even looking at their draft, they didn't improve an offensive line. So I don't know how this team expects to run the football any better if they don't make any changes at offensive line. But let's get it moving here through the usual. Picked up Joe Haeg, Trey Turner. They hung on to Juju and defensive end Tyson Alualu. So those are some good things. They lost Bud Dupree, cornerback Mike Hilton, right tackle Matt Feeler, left tackle Alejandro Villanueva, and James Conner. Did you hear the offensive line get better or worse there, Andrew?
Doesn't sound like they added really anybody. And we're forgetting David DeCastro, the longtime right guard. He retired this offseason. So I'm not sure if Matt Feeler was a starter. I don't think so, because I think Zach Banner is the starting right tackle for him, former Colts 4th-round draft pick. But Trey Turner, I think, is probably going to come in there and try to replace what Joe Haeg or what David DeCastro left.
Yeah.
Didn't Mike Pouncey? Didn't he retire as well? So
yeah,
that's a lot of people. That's a lot of people.
Mike Pouncey was a mean dude too.
Line. He was. That's a lot of people along that offensive line that will not be there to protect Big Ben and allow Najee Harris to run free and pick up yardage.
Yeah, and you didn't even mention Villanueva, one of the better left tackles in the league. He goes to the Ravens. He's next door. He's practically in the same state. I don't get it. Draft, they had 9 picks. First round pick, Najee Harris, running back out of Alabama. Second round pick was a tight end out of Penn State, Pat Freiermuth, whatever. They got a guard. They got a guard in round 3 and a tackle in round 4. Round 3 and round 4, that's some high hopes for a couple of upper mid-round guys to be replacing who they're replacing. I don't think it's reasonable expectations. Now, they do have Mike Tomlin. I think they're going to turn towards smash your face in, running the ball attitude. Big Ben is eating the avocado ice cream, apparently has a diet more strict than Tom Brady's was, healthy as ever. So we'll see how they turn it around, and if there's a guy that's going to do it, it's going to be Mike Tomlin, but I don't know. Primetime, they've got 5 games, bye week in week 7. They have to go to Buffalo week 1. They've got Seattle week 6. Obviously, all the other teams, the Chiefs, the Raiders, the Chargers, who might be good, the Broncos, who might be good, especially if they pick up an Aaron Rodgers. If they don't get Aaron Rodgers is probably still in Green Bay, and they got to deal with him then. So they got to deal with Aaron Rodgers one way or the other. I'm going to guess. And then listen to this, Andrew. Finish the season: Baltimore, Minnesota, Tennessee, Kansas City, Cleveland, Baltimore.
Yikes.
The Steelers are in trouble. Now, Peter Schrager this week on Pat McAfee's show said this, and this quote stood out to me. It kind of sounded badass, but he says, I know that team, I know the vibe in that building. They have been so hungry since that loss to the Browns, and they have been watching and listening, and they're well aware of what people think they're going to be. I don't think being aware of it is going to make a damn difference. I just don't think this team is going to be able to run the football the way they need to, especially if you got Big Ben checking out of runs all the time because he just thinks he can throw it and sling the pill to win football games, throwing it 5 to 10 yards every time he throws the football. I just don't get it. What do you expect from the Steelers this year?
It's tough. I'll go back to this. We're going to probably mention it later in the show, but today, defensive end Melvin Ingram also signed with the Pittsburgh Steelers on a 1-year deal. But as far I like Najee Harris. I mean, he was probably my running back number one or close to with Travis Etienne. Pat Freiermuth, obviously they need a tight end because Eric Ebron is garbage. So, and I liked him coming out. So, but that's the thing. As Colts fans, we know this. You need a successful and a big time offensive line if you want to run the ball dominantly. You saw what Cleveland has done with their offensive line. The Colts, you're talking about even Baltimore, their great offensive line. It's they also have great backs, but you need a big, huge, great offensive line if you want to run the ball. And you talked about that end of season slate in the schedule. Baltimore has a great pass rush. Minnesota, okay. Tennessee, we'll see. But Kansas City's got a decent defense. Cleveland's got a really good defense. And then Baltimore, again, with a great pass rush and a great defense. Big Ben, if you're relying on him to throw the ball 50 times a game, you're not going to win very many games. Nope. And it's just as simple as that. They may be aware, but as far as the Steelers, I think they were division champs last year. I don't see the Steelers making the playoffs. And I know Mike Tomlin has never had a losing season in Pittsburgh, so I don't expect them to have a losing season. I really don't think they'll have a losing season, but I think they could be 9-8. Something like that, where they miss it by they're like the 8th or 9th team in the AFC because Kansas City, Buffalo, Cleveland, Baltimore, Indy, Tennessee, Miami, all those teams I think are better than the Pittsburgh Steelers. So it's going to be a tough one for the Steelers. And I just seeing what they did last year, their defense is still going to be good. I will give them that. I just don't have faith in that offensive line and Big Ben to carry them into the playoffs.
I don't see them winning more than one game out of that last 6-game stretch. I think Baltimore beats them twice. I think the Browns beat them. I think Minnesota and Tennessee are their best chance, and I don't have a lot of faith in them beating Tennessee either. That's a tough run there at the end of the season. And yeah, Andrew, they can't hide behind. Mike Tomlin can't hide behind an 8-8 season this year to get out without a losing season. That's been his worst season. I think this is the year. And you mentioned the spending on their offensive line. They're in the bottom. I just saw like a list. I don't think they were very last, but they were like bottom 3 in money spent on offensive line. Can't run the football. Can't have any long developing plays when you're not willing to spend any money on your offensive line. When you're in the same neighborhood as the Bengals on spending in anything, you're doing something wrong. Ravens, 11-5 last season. Free agency, pick up, and as usual, Andrew, feel free to let me know if I miss any. They pick up guard Kevin Zeitler from New York Giants. He got a 3-year, $22.5 million deal. Villanueva, obviously, we talked about him. Sammy Watkins, just a veteran presence in the wide receiver room. I think that gives, Lamar just one more person to throw the ball to, and to learn from, I guess, in a sense. They hung on to outside linebacker Tyus Bowser, 4-year, $22 million. Gone outside linebacker Matt Judon to New England, 4-year, $54.5 million. Sheesh. Yannick Ngakoue, he changes teams every year. He went to Vegas. I believe we talked about that. And I don't know that these two really have much of an effect, but they're big names. So I do think RG3 and Lamar were really tight. He is unsigned as of right now, and Des Bryant also unsigned. I don't see any other teams besides the Ravens signing either one of them. So we'll see if anything happens later in the offseason, maybe around camp. Draft round 1, pick 27. They did pick up another wide receiver, Rashad Bateman from Minnesota. Another first round pick, 31st overall, Odafe Owe. And if autocorrect got me there, oh well. Linebacker out of Penn State. What do you think about the?
It's Jason Away.
Definitely
very athletic.
I don't know what the hell autocorrect was doing there. How did I get
very? I don't know. Hey, I know. I feel your pain, brother. But Rashad Bateman, I really liked that draft pick because he's. While they signed Sammy Watkins, I don't really have much faith in Sammy Watkins being a top receiver that Lamar Jackson can go to. They've got Hollywood Brown.
How do you feel about Hollywood Brown?
Andrews.
Because I'm not as high on him as everybody else seems to be.
I think he's a great fit for what the Ravens want to do. I think in other offenses, he probably wouldn't be as prolific. But the thing with Hollywood Brown is when you've got a smaller wide receiver and a speed guy, with all the stuff that the Ravens do with play action, not only because of Lamar's ability to run, but J.K. Dobbins, I think they and just the multitude of backs and running threats that they have, Hollywood Brown can get behind defenses. But Rashad Bateman, what he brings that big-bodied wide receiver that has a large catch radius, and he can make other plays for you in those tougher situations. So Lamar's got three legitimate threats in Hollywood Brown, Mark Andrews, and I think Rashad Bateman will develop into that as well.
Let's talk about their schedule. Primetime, 5 games. They want Lamar Jackson on primetime TV, plain and simple. The dude's incredible. He was fun to watch. Even better in person. It's not as fun to watch it in person when he's playing your team. They do host us on Monday Night Football, Week 5. That's one of our primetime games. They've got a bye week in Week 8. Not a bad bye. Notable games, obviously, they play Kansas City, but they do get to host them Sunday Night Football, Week 2. Lamar Jackson publicly called the Kansas City Chiefs, the Ravens kryptonite. Maybe they'll break that this year. It's not I don't give a shit, but the media took that and ran with it. The media goes, oh, so they own you. They're at Miami, Thursday Night Football, Week 10. Last 2 games at home, including one against the Rams. That'll be a tough game, and I think the other one was the Steelers. Not as tough of a schedule based on what I saw, as the Steelers are going to have, and definitely no runs of brutality like the Steelers are going to have, but they do have to play the Steelers twice, and they have to play the Browns twice, and that's the team I'm really interested in talking about. Andrew, do you have any overall statements about the Ravens? Did they get better, worse, same?
I think they probably stayed about the same, but I still think this Ravens team is just oozing with talent. And I consider Lamar Jackson, while he's probably not the best passer that you'll ever see, I do consider Lamar Jackson a top 10 quarterback in this league just because of how dangerous he is as a weapon. He has shown that at times he can be a very prolific passer. I just think that for me at least, what I want to see Lamar Jackson do is we've seen him be incredible in the regular season. But when it comes playoff time, there are just certain points where it seems like he becomes invisible or teams can shut him down. Yeah. I want to see him be able to be more consistent in the playoffs. And this isn't a knock on Lamar Jackson either. He's a young quarterback. That happens. But in order for me to jump into that tier of top 5 quarterbacks, like with the Patrick Mahomes, the Josh Allens, the things like that, you want to see a Lamar Jackson that can stay consistent throughout throughout the playoffs and really rise to the occasion and carry a team through those big playoff wins. And it might be this year. Again, the AFC is going to be incredibly tough, but I think for me, that's the next step I want to see him take.
Yeah, teams figure out what you do well throughout the season by the time they see you in the playoffs. I mean, they're more prepared in the playoffs for you than maybe early in the season. So team coordinators need to figure out a way to be more creative and create opportunities for playmakers like Lamar Jackson. But look at Aaron Rodgers. I mean, even Aaron Rodgers, without enough help, can only do so much when it's all on him in the playoffs. And Lamar Jackson's not Aaron Rodgers, so I don't see him, taking a step above an entire defense and just taking over a game in the playoffs when let's face it, that's when defenses are at their best is in the playoffs. Browns. This is the team, man. This is the year. Browns are going to at least an AFC championship game, unless they come across us prior. But Browns 11-5 last season. I mean, really close to stealing that second spot against the Ravens. They did not get worse this offseason. They pick up strong safety John Johnson. Clowney, whether you like him or not, I know we're not big fans of him, but even if he's not causing sacks, he's causing some kind of disruption. They sign him for another 1 year deal for Clowney, $8 million, and they got some leadership in the linebacker department, Andrew, and Anthony Walker Jr.
Anthony Walker. I mean, I think Colts fans are really going to see this year. I mean, not as much maybe how it is valuable on the field, but the Colts players certainly notice the leadership void that Anthony Walker is leaving by going over to the Cleveland Browns. I mean, he was one of the main voices and one of the leaders in this locker room. And Darius Leonard has said he's going to step up. So is Bobby Okereke. But that mattered for this locker room. And I think Anthony Walker, obviously, it was time for him him and the Colts to part ways because Okereke's the better player at this point. Anthony Walker didn't want to be a backup. So I'm happy for him. I hope he has success there in Cleveland. And he's going to be a very big voice and a big contributor to that Cleveland Browns defense.
You ready to hear who they lost, Andrew?
Go ahead.
Not a single person that anyone listening to this podcast has heard of. Not a one. honest to God, there were barely any names on the list I recognized at all. So nobody that went off and signed any big deals. I mean, I didn't see anything. So they're going to be good again this year. They're well coached. The second year in the system, they're going to be tough. Draft, they got Greg Newsome the second, a guy that we liked in round one. Round two, they got Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, a linebacker out of Notre Dame, another guy that we liked. And they did pick up another wide receiver in round three. You're going to have Odell coming back. This argument went on all last year just because of Odell getting hurt and the Browns suddenly, doing a little better. Are the Browns better without Odell? No, they are not. Odell is an incredible wide receiver. Baker Mayfield got better in a new system as the season went on. Was there a little less pressure on Baker to throw the ball to Odell? Yeah. But I have to imagine after the success they had without him this year, that offense doesn't have to revolve around Odell Beckham Jr. Odell Beckham Jr., I think, is going to be able to shut his mouth and just play ball this year. And I think he makes that team better. I think that the idea that they're better without Odell is laughable. You agree with that?
I would say this. I mean, Odell is a top wide receiver talent in this league. I think they are better talent-wise with him on the field, but he also needs to kind of show what he's about. Is he about the stats and the glory, or is he okay with taking a back seat and winning football games, letting the Browns offensive line, who I think is right up there with Indianapolis as one of the best lines in football, letting Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt go to work, allowing Baker Mayfield to distribute it to the open weapons rather than force feeding and trying to target Odell 12 times a game just to keep Odell happy. So I think as Odell has gotten older in this league, he's matured some, and Kevin Stefanski is a good coach. He's a good leader. So I think he is, well, as long as he buys into the system and isn't worrying about the stats and is more worried about team success, he's going to be a valuable asset to the Cleveland Browns like he should be. He's a great wide receiver.
Baker Mayfield also ought to be to the point where he's able to look at Odell and tell him to shut the hell up or he's not throwing him the football. You know, he's a more vocal guy than Eli ever was. Mm-hmm. You know, and Odell ought to be able to sit back and say, okay, that's my quarterback. That's the boss. We got to keep it moving here, Andrew. Schedule, they've only got 3 primetime games. Look for them to be on a 4 or 5 next year. Bye week 13, that's late. That's tough. But it is going to, you know, propel them for a tough late end of the season. They open at Kansas City. That's going to be one of the games of the week. Unfortunately, it's at 1 p.m. at New England, week 10. Other than that, smooth sailing for the Browns, other than the obvious teams in their division and the NFC North and AFC West. Bengals, 4-11-1 last year. They did lose Joe Burrow at one point. I really don't want to spend a lot of time on the Bengals, so we'll just hurry up through this. They did pick up defensive end Trey Hendrickson, 4-year, $60 million. Cornerback Mike Hilton, like I mentioned, 4-year, $24 million, and a cornerback Awuzie, 3-year, $21.75 million. So they did, it appears, have a little bit of an emphasis on the secondary. Left tackle Riley Reif, 1 year, $7.5 from Minnesota. A lot of 1-year deals this year because nobody knows what the salary cap's going to be next year. Gone. They do lose defensive end Carl Lawson to the Jets, 3 years, $45 million. Cornerback William Jackson to Washington, 3 years, $40.5 million. AJ Green, John Ross are both gone. The draft, they had 10 picks. 10 picks. They got Jamar Chase, round 1, pick 5, out of LSU, and a tackle from Clemson in the second round. Other than that, no names I really knew. Anything to say about their free agency draft, Andrew?
I think Carl Lawson's going to be a big loss.
Yeah.
Carl Lawson is a guy that was really coming on last year, and he got big money from the Jets. So, I mean, obviously, I thought their main priority this offseason should have been protecting Joe Burrow. That's why I thought Penei Sewell was going to go there. Obviously, they liked the connection between Chase or Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase more. So you pair Burrow with Jamar Chase. They have T. Higgins, who they took in the draft last year. Tyler Boyd, who's a great wide receiver in the slot. You've got 3 really good weapons for Joe Burrow. It's just going to be about now keeping him upright and keeping him protected back there, because you don't want to see Andrew Luck 2.0, where the guy's career is cut short because of these injuries. So they just need to really be mindful of that, and they also need to work with Joe Burrow of getting rid of it quickly, kind of protecting his body. But as far as the weapons for Joe Burrow, I think they're in place because you got Joe Mixon as well there in the backfield. But like I said, really, it's not going to matter if Joe Burrow's on his back.
Yeah, schedule 1 primetime game, a Thursday night game against Jacksonville, week 4. The only interesting storyline in that is Joe Burrow and Trevor Lawrence. Other than that, I might just sleep through that one. Bye week in week 10. Notable games. There was not a single game on that list that intrigued me except for maybe the Thursday night game. Might be the only Bengals game I watched. So, my prediction, Andrew, for the AFC North: Browns, Ravens, Steelers, Bengals.
You know what? I'm going to go with that same exact pairing. I think usually usually I'm the guy that's not into the Browns hype, but this year I really like what they did on the defensive side of the ball, and I think that's going to make a major difference. Is I think this defense is easily top 5 in the league. So, and I think this Browns defense, along with Baker Mayfield getting another year, getting Odell back, Kevin Stefanski being there another year, I do think this Browns team will take the AFC North this year, but the Ravens are going to be right on their heels. So if the Ravens win the NFC North this year, it won't surprise me. But I think those are the 2 teams that will make it in the playoffs. I don't see Pittsburgh making it, and the Bengals are still a rebuilding young team.
The Browns, the difference between this year and any other year, the hype, they proved it finally last year. They made the playoffs. They beat the Steelers, and they damn near beat the Chiefs. So they put it on paper, and they brought back a really good team, and they made improvements. So, and then you add on top of that, that was the first year that Kevin Stefanski was coaching them. So Browns are going to be a good football team. Honest to God, I think they'll probably end up being the number 2 seed, unfortunately, which doesn't get them shit in regards to a bye, but I think that's where they're going to be sitting. Let's move along to some news around the league. Andrew, was it Thursday morning? Cornerback Richard Sherman arrested in Seattle for burglary, domestic violence. He was released on Thursday, pled not guilty to 5 misdemeanor charges. I did find out, Andrew, that was in Redmond, Washington. By the way, I visited Redmond, Washington. I live in Washington right now, Seattle. It's a Seattle area. I visited that area literally hours after this happened. Went to a dog park. So, wild coincidence. So in the state of Washington, for anything related to domestic violence charges, you cannot post bail. There is no bail. You have to go see a judge first. So that is why he was held for 24 hours. And you said, like you said, pled not guilty to 5 misdemeanor charges. A couple of those, I believe, were supposed to be felony, and they were dropped down to misdemeanor. So not good for him.
Yeah, it's just a bad situation.
Yeah.
All the way around. It looks like he was involved in an accident, and then he fled the scene. Then the video comes out of him trying to break down the door of his father-in-law's house, trying to get in. It's just not a good situation. And he put out some things on social media saying he's going to get the help he needs. And I really do hope so, because from everything that I've seen over the years, Richard Sherman is a very, very calculated person. He's a very smart person. I mean, people forget he went to Stanford and graduated from Stanford. So to see him like this, I mean, he's not signed with a team. I don't expect him to be signed with a team now through for this year. And with how old Richard Sherman's getting, his career may be over.
Yeah.
So, but I do hope he gets the help that he needs. And it's a scary and just a kind of a sad situation all the way around for Richard Sherman.
Yeah, other than his little outburst with Aaron Andrews, which, I mean, didn't do anything wrong. He was just hyped up after a intense game. They shove a microphone in the guy's face. I mean, what do you expect out of a guy? But other than that, this is the only issue Richard Sherman's ever brought about. You know, he's been active with the NFLPA, all sorts of stuff. Smart guy, like you said. We most certainly respect and the mental health issues, and hope that he does get the help he needs. But I cannot let it go without stating that NFL memes on Instagram saying that the Jets signed the door that Richard Sherman couldn't knock down was one of the funniest things I've ever seen. It was one of the funniest things I've ever seen. Let's move along. ESPN has agreed to a partnership with Peyton Manning and Omaha Productions for the next 3 seasons that will feature 10 Monday Night Football megacasts per season on ESPN2, headlined by Peyton and Eli Manning alternating weeks. What does that mean? What is that? Explain.
So basically, during the Monday Night Football games, you're going to have the main broadcast on ESPN with Steve Levy, Brian Griese, and Louis Riddick. But then if you don't want to watch those guys, you can go on over to ESPN2, watch Peyton and Eli talk about the game, break down the game. They're going to have current and former NFL stars on the broadcast.
Who's not going to watch that
talking
one
about
instead?
the game. Yeah, I saw tweets that they're saying the ESPN2 megacast with the Manning brothers will outrank and outrate the regular broadcast.
Absolutely.
That's probably what I'll be watching whenever they're on. So it's cool. I'm glad to see Peyton and Eli doing that. It's going to be fun. Get
those two involved with the Nickelodeon game too. I mean, that'd be absolutely phenomenal.
Although Nate Burleson did a phenomenal job with that last year. I'm a big fan of Nate Burleson as far as him as an analyst or an announcer. He's a good guy.
Defensive end Melvin Ingram signs with the Steelers on a 1-year deal. We brought that up earlier. Melvin Ingram, Andrew, essentially said 0 sacks out of 7 games played last year. I don't think he was himself in general, but Andrew, you think he's about done?
I don't know how much time he has left. My editor at Sports Illustrated, Josh Carney, also writes for Steelers Depot, and he doesn't think Ingram's going to come in as a starter either to begin with. He's going to be more of a rotational pass rusher. So we'll see how much this really affects and does how much it really helps the Steelers defensive line.
Hey, not a bad third down back to have, though. Realistically. I mean, if that's all you want him for is rushing the passer and it's a passing situation on third down, you say, hey, let him loose. Not a bad guy to have. That's it on NFL news. Andrew, where is it? Turn it down for the fans. Let's go to the new kid at school. Class is in session.
So we got another new kid at school this week. We're entering the 7th round of the Colts picks in the 2021 draft. We're going to talk about the big-bodied wide receiver, Mike Strawn. So he was selected with the 229th pick in the 2021 NFL draft. He was actually born and raised in the Bahamas. So him and his brothers and his family grew up there. He didn't move to the States until his high school years, actually, but he did grow up playing football, and his dreams actually weren't to play in the NFL, but he was actually hoping to run track in the Olympics someday. So him and his family moved to Lynchburg, Virginia before his sophomore year, and he ended up attending Liberty Christian Academy. And at Liberty Christian, he actually became a star athlete, not only playing football and in track, but he also lettered in basketball as well. He helped Lynchburg win the state championship in 2013, and he earned all state honors as a senior in 2015. So, and then talking about just his track background, this kid was good at track. He wasn't just high hopes to make the Olympics. He had a legitimate shot. He finished third in 2016 state championships in the 400 meter and really had personal best times in the 200 meter, the 400 meter in his senior year. So he was athlete. A real big track star. So, but while he was that big time athlete, he just because he came to the United States and the recruiting process started a little late, he was a no-star recruit, and he received really little interest outside of a few FCS programs. His academic testing was also an obstacle because of where he had transferred from the Bahamas, and it was kind of hard getting those scores and everything transferred over to the United States educational system. But he ended up signing with Division II Charleston in football and in track. So the track background actually helped him get that scholarship to Charleston. Now on the football side, he had breakout seasons as a redshirt sophomore and a junior. And he had 78 catches for 1,319 yards and 19 touchdowns as a junior. And this is what really put him on the NFL radar for teams that huge seasons his sophomore and his junior year. And then we'll go back to his track background. So he continued to excel in track in college. He won numerous indoor and outdoor conference championships in the 200 meter and the 400 meter. And he actually holds the school record at Charleston for the 400 meter. So not only is this kid big, which we'll talk about his size here in a second, the kid's got track speed. So that bodes well for him. And he also has kind of football in his blood. So his father, Jerome, played wide receiver in college at Bethune-Cookman College. So this guy's just an incredible athlete, as seen by being a track champion in college, being an absolute monster on the football field. Whether it's Division II or not, it's still a huge accomplishment. So the Colts took a flyer on him in the 7th round. So how's he going to help the Colts? And like I said, just an absolutely huge wide receiver. The kid is 6'5", 224 pounds. And like I said, that track speed, he's a huge guy and he runs a 4.5 40. And it seems like in those long distance runs, like the 400 meter, it's not particularly long distance as in miles, but when you're talking about on a football field, that's a pretty good distance. So this kid will continue to build up speed. And it was hard for cornerbacks to keep up with him on those deep routes in college because of that speed. He's, like I said, it's a big physical presence, and he really dominated the West Virginia Pro Day. So he didn't go to Charleston's Pro Day because Charleston's season was actually canceled due to the pandemic, and then he opted out of the spring season to go to the drafts. So instead of holding your Pro Day at Charleston, where not many NFL teams are going to go, he instead went to West Virginia and stood out amongst those Division I players. Wow. And that's actually where the Colts noticed him was at that West Virginia Pro Day. He's a dangerous vertical threat, has a really big catch radius with those long arms, those big hands, and he's a physical player. The scouting reports, a lot of them said he looks and he's built more like a power forward than a wide receiver. So you can use that in the red zone, on slant routes, kind of really anytime a big body wide receiver is needed. Now, he is a little bit raw with his route running, but we've heard Chris Ballard say this offseason that he might not be as raw as people think. So we're definitely going to want to watch him with his route running, with getting in and out of his cuts, not just a vertical deep threat if he really wants to make this team. But I really think that it's going to be between him and Desmond Patman for this final wide receiver spot on the Colts roster. And we're going to see how Desmond Patman has came along this past year and a half, and how Michael Strawn, we're going to see the traits that he has. How can he transition those to the NFL, and if he can make a big impact? So that's going to be one of my top battles to watch in camp. But Mike Strawn, big body wide receiver, great kid, and a hell of a story.
Yeah, and I know you just mentioned, you see his ceiling as maybe taking that final position from Patman. They're both fit freaks. They're both fast, big guys. The picture I've got up for you here, Andrew, is a picture of Mike Strawn and Carson Wentz looking pretty chummy. So who knows? I mean, sometimes it's just a matter of getting the work in with the QB. And I mean, if he's just throwing you the football more than he's throwing it to other people in camp, that could be the difference in that roster spot. So yeah, that's a good one.
If he has a great connection with Carson Wentz going into camp and throughout the preseason and throughout training camp, that could just be the edge that he needs to beat Desmond Patman in that final roster spot.
Exactly. So that's it, guys. Go follow us on all the things. First, while you're listening right now, click like, subscribe, hit the little bell on YouTube. Go follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Twitter, Instagram at @theeducatedfan_. Little underscore at the end of that. Also check out our website, theeducatedfan.com, and don't forget to go check out Every Cup Begins with K. Okay, I mean, these cups are awesome, guys. They got a straw too. I like straws. Don't like the way you look when you drink out of them, but makes you just look a little girly, a little sissy like. But yeah, I think that's it. Like I said, go follow all the things. Thanks for listening to The Educated Fan. And let's see if we can get it, Andrew. Thank you for listening to The Educated Fan. Go Colts.
Go Colts.
I fucking love football, and I love you guys.
Close.